Hello, I'm Dr. Rasor. I'm your host for the 5-Minute Thinker. Today, this is the more than 5-minute thinker. Typically, I do a 5-minute thinker. If you haven't had the chance to check that out, I encourage you to go to my YouTube channel and take a look at some of those videos. But here is my extended version, the more than 5. And I'm an author, pastor, and professor. For 20 years, I've been in ministry in the local church as well as in higher education, teaching philosophy, theology, and apologetics. Today, I am really excited to share with you a conversation that I had with Dr. Gary Habermas. Many people may know him from his very large work, multi-volume work on the resurrection of Jesus. In fact, right now, there are 3 volumes out, a 4th one yet to follow. But in this particular conversation that I had with Gary Habermas, it had to do with near-death experiences. And so I hope that you get a lot out of this, and it makes you think. And if you enjoy what you hear, if you like what you hear, and you're getting some good things out of it, please like and subscribe, and also share the video. I would love for you to do that, and that'll help others get some good information and use our minds to think and hopefully become a Christian at some point. But overall, that we can become better thinkers as we are in God's image. So without going into anything else, without any further ado, as we say, I want to go ahead and play this conversation I had with Dr. Gary Habermas with you. I hope you enjoy it. Well, welcome, Gary, to my podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with me.
Cool.
Yeah, of course, you're here to speak about the shroud at my church this evening, but I had a lot of people actually give me feedback saying they would like to talk about near-death experiences, something that you evidently have been doing for quite some time.
Actually, since, if you want a date, because a specific reason I remember this date, 1972.
Oh my, that's 2 years before I was born.
It's what?
2 years before I was born.
Yeah, that's because you're a young guy.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, what interested you in near-death experiences to begin with?
Same thing that interests me about the resurrection, so you can put those two together. NDEs came because I went through a period of doubt, off and on for 20 years, and was bookended by the deaths of the 2 people in my life who were the closest to me.
Mm.
And so I wanted to know 2 things, because the 2 people died. I want to know, A, there was an afterlife. And I want to know, more importantly, that Christianity was true. So I got into a bunch of things. A couple of them I'm not very happy about because, for example, I got into the occult.
Mm.
And when I lecture in my philosophy classes in the old days, I only teach PhD apologetics courses now, but in the old days, in philosophy, I wouldn't give details about the occult because it's a page turner.
Mm.
And it's addictive. But NDEs are similarly, but not addictive and not occultic, at least not necessarily. They can be, but so can all of life be occultic.
Right.
So it was just one of many NDEs. It was just one of many subjects I got into in a search for whether Christianity is true and whether there's an afterlife.
Yeah. I find near-death experiences interesting because when I reflect back, let's say back in my 20s, I grew up in a more sort of interesting, somewhat fundamentalist type of religious Christian background. And I would be, if I were interviewing you and talking with you back in my 20s, I'd be very skeptical
Of
near-death experiences. I'd be like,
okay.
Oh my goodness, because back then I would have been a cessationist, someone who would say that no miracles, no any of these other types
NDEs.
of... Yeah, NDEs would be like in the same category.
Yeah.
And so that really fascinates me how you were just so open to it. But were you a believer at the time, or?
When in 72?
Yeah.
Well, I was a believer when my doubt started.
Oh, okay.
But I was not grounded.
Mm-hmm.
When the first time I ever read the one-liner, one paragraph in a book said, if Jesus was raised from the dead, then he is who he said he was, and therefore Christianity follows. And I thought, That's a great argument. But here's the problem. I don't know anything about the resurrection.
Right.
That started me on the resurrection. But unfortunately, because I was trying to get into life after death and so on, I did some occultic stuff now too, which I had an occultic leader tell me, I'm not answering your questions. You're playing with fire. He said, stop it.
Mm,
So,
interesting.
but NDEs was a
Right.
non-occultic way to talk about the afterlife, and I gravitated to that. And I read some sources back in the early '70s that there wasn't too many evidential cases, but there weren't too many evidential cases back then.
Right.
And now it's changed like crazy. There's
Yeah.
hundreds.
What do you think has led to a more interest in that area? Because, like you said, back in the '70s when you first began, there wasn't as much evidence, but now it seems like there's a page turner's evidence everywhere anymore.
That's the reason. I think the occult is a real page turner. The NDEs are not occultic, not necessarily anyway, but it's a page turner because everybody wants to know what's on the other side.
Right, right. So, what I'd like to get to in our conversation at some point is how reliable you think these NDEs are, or near-death experiences. But first, before we approach that, I have the question of, first of all, some people may not understand exactly what we mean by near-death experiences. How would you categorize that? How would you define it? So on and so forth.
There's different levels, different types, but ideally, someone might say, well, a near-death experience is where somebody comes close to death. It could be anywhere from, hey, we better get you some help because you're not going to live for a whole lot longer if we don't, to you can't even talk because you're already out and you're very close to death right now. But thankfully, somebody stops the bleed, whatever it is, and you come back and tell a story, and that got people's interest. Now, in the old days, the story in the '70s and '80s, these NDEs weren't terribly evidential.
Mm.
And they would be a little bit like, oh, I saw this little tiny thing go, oh, that's not super evidential, but it's a neat little story. And now there's ones coming out that are super, super. In fact, I think of intelligent design, fine tuning near death experiences. They're all evidences for religion, but not necessarily for Christianity. But I think of those three, NDEs have as much evidence in their favor as either fine tuning or ID. And I think those have lots of evidence. And I think NDEs do too. So I think for this category, there is just evidence galore for some kind of supernaturalism. And then when you step in and say, hey, have you heard about the resurrection? Now you bring it back to Christianity. And that makes all these other things relevant in a different way. I mean, like, fine tuning and intelligent design, Romans 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't bring these things. And then, like Mike was saying to me not long ago, matter of fact, today, he said, that shows us consistent with Christianity, but the resurrection says, come on in.
Right, right.
And takes this stuff. And to me, if there's good evidence for NDEs, the resurrection ropes it in by virtue of the evidence for, let's put it this way, if this helps. NDEs say there's an afterlife. It does not say there's eternal life.
Right.
Resurrection says there's both. An afterlife that goes forever, whether you believe it or not.
Right.
There's eternal life. So I think the resurrection takes NDEs an extra step.
Right, right. Yeah, you mentioned evidence. You say that there's a lot of evidence. What do we mean, or I should say, what do you mean by evidence here for NDEs? Because, as you're well aware, our society is very skeptical, very subjective, and there's probably a temptation or the idea that, well, that happened to you, so it's not really an objective experience which can be validated or justified that this really happened.
Yep.
How do we navigate those waters? What do you mean by evidence? And is this evidence objective or is it just purely subjective?
Yeah, it's not purely subjective for sure. There's some heavy evidence. Now, I could give you a few examples of NDEs that I can get in and out of in maybe a minute each, where some of them was ones that would take me, as one I just told Mike today, Some of them, it would take me 5 minutes to explain the NDE, but they're really, really highly evidential. There's some quite evidential ones that would only take a minute. So, I mean, if you want me to give some of those, they are good evidential cases for something. And I'd say they're evidences for an afterlife. Now, if you put all of them together, here's an example. I did one of 3 major publications at NDEs in a book on dualism for Discovery publishers. Meyer and all those guys, Stephen Meyer, and and Bill Dembski.
Right.
And so my editor was a physicist, like the guys at Discovery. But they asked me to do a thing on NDEs because some of the guys that were doing dualism said we need an empirical chapter.
Oh, interesting.
And J.P. Moreland, a great friend of mine, but J.P. Moreland, and this is the way he talks. He goes, "You got the only empirical chapter in the book, so I'm going to tell you something, buddy. You better do a good job." And so I got into it. Well, my editor's a physicist, and I said to the guy, I said, "I'm going to say something you might think is pretty bold, but I'm going to go ahead and say it because I want to know what you think of it," the physicist. And I said, "I think there's as much good evidence for NDEs as there is for intelligent design or fine-tuning."
Oh, my.
And that's what he said.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, my." And then he goes, having just edited your chapter in your 20 cases, you might be right. I wouldn't argue with you right now."
Oh, wow.
So I think those 3 are kind of up there as the best evidences for some kind of religion. It just doesn't say which religion is true.
Right. So the NDEs really, and the work that you've been able to accomplish is more focused on just showing that there's at least afterlife. There's something supernatural. There's something beyond the grave.
Yeah, no, intelligent design, fine-tuning, we show other kinds of religious arguments, but the point is religion's here.
Right.
Now, which one?
Yeah.
And now we're back to that book where I read if Jesus is raised from the dead, that's it. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I don't know how to argue for the resurrection. So these all work together.
Yeah, they do.
You know?
Yeah, right. And I can definitely see how there's a connection then with why you'd be interested in the near-death experiences and how it relates to the resurrection.
Especially if I've lost the 2 people on each side of my bookends of my doubt.
Right.
I want to know that I'm going to see them again after death.
Yeah, absolutely, which I think most people can definitely relate to. I think we all have that sentiment.
Sure.
So give us an example of one of the most compelling evidential near-death experiences that you find just absolutely fascinating. And if perhaps, obviously it's maybe kind of hard to imagine this, but let's say you're an unbeliever and you look at this particular evidence and you're like, wow, this seems pretty compelling.
Unbeliever in afterlife, because these don't prove Christianity.
Yeah, right, exactly. An unbeliever and someone who doesn't believe, let's say you're just a pure naturalist or a materialist, someone who believes there's nothing beyond the grave.
I love to tell these to a naturalist. In fact, let me tell you one thing first. In a recent survey, where all the people who took the survey are either atheists or agnostics, 32% of them said they believed in heaven or an afterlife.
Oh, wow.
Now, tell me where that comes from if your worldview says this doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty high stat for that.
It's pretty high for someone who's a naturalist or a materialist.
Yeah. Yeah,
so, okay, I'll give you a couple quickies, and if you want heavier ones, or it'll take longer to develop them, but here's a couple faster ones. There's a case years ago where a woman with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, she is being operated on, and she said, while y'all operated on me, I was up above my body, and I looked down, and there's a contraption in the room, a medical contraption that's over everybody's head. She's 6 to 8 feet tall, and there's a number on top, and it's 12 numbers. And when she comes to, she tells the nurses, she's recovering, and she goes, get a pen, write this down. Why? Just do it. I can't remember this real long. I'm OCD, and I have a tendency to remember long numbers. You ready? Yeah. Okay, whatever. And they got a piece, and she gives 12 digits. A few days later, a janitor or whatever comes in to get that thing to move it somewhere else. The numbers are to tell you where in the hospital the thing is, and he's moving it out. And he gets up there, and one of the 2 nurses, at least, it might have been both, but one of them was there when he came in to move it. And she goes, hey, tell me one thing. Is there anything on top of that thing? And he goes, well, I'll have to get a stepladder, but okay. And he goes up and he looks. And he goes, A lot of dust. And she goes, no, I mean like something else up there. Goes, there's nothing up here except for a number, lady. And she goes, well, tell me what the number is. And she gets the number out, and all 12 digits are correct in order.
My.
So my research assistant at that time, you know how students today, at least my PhD students, younger, they have magic fingers. They can find anything on a computer. He locates this woman, the nurse who first got the number. And he said, hey, did that case happen just like in the story? And she said, it did. And he said, all right, I got one question. What did it do for you? This is an amazing comment, but the nurse said, it's the most important thing that ever happened to me in my life.
Wow.
Now, she went on and finished a PhD in nursing, and she's a professor of nursing at New England Secular University. But it was that instrumental in her life. Now, I don't know what that meant. Was it because she believed in the afterlife? Was it because she became a believer, Christian? I don't know. But she was the recipient. Another one, this is not as evidential, but a person came back same way and said, hey, there's a quarter up there, 25-cent piece, and it's in 1982. And they said, oh, yeah, well, people throw things up there, you know. And so the doctor came in to check this guy after surgery, and the guy said, sir, to the doctor, you'd do me a great favor if you'd be the one who got a ladder and went up there. And it's, you know, and a quarter is either going to be, the first two numbers are either going to be 19 or 20. That's not highly evidential. But the last two numbers, to get two in a row, those numbers are kind of higher. So the medical doctor went and got the ladder, went up there, found the quarter, goes, there's 1982. And the guy brought it down. So he always remembered that it was the doctor that verified his story. So there's a short and not high. The 12-digit number one, I think, is pretty heavy.
Right.
But there's let's put it this way. In the essays that I do on this, I divide NDE evidence into 5 categories. And real quickly, in the room, outside the room, like 4 floors away where your relatives are in the hospital, NDEs in the blind, where they've been blind from birth, and the only time they've seen anything is during the NDE. They were blind before, and they go back, darn it, NDE's over and I'm blind again, you know. And 4 and 5 are Twilight Zone categories. 4 is, there's over 100 known cases of healthy people sharing the NDEer's experience.
Oh, my.
So, and they're often doctors or nurses because they're nearby. And let's say you got the old tunnel experience. Now, the tunnel is not as common as people think it is in the studies. But let's just say there's a tunnel, and this person is dead, so they're going up in the tunnel. But all of a sudden, the nurse or doctor goes, whoa, what's happening to me? And they're going up in the tunnel. And when they get up there, let's say Peter at Peter's Gate, you know, says, what have you done? The old question there for whatever it was, Campus Crusade or something. What have you done that I should let you in the kingdom? And they said, I don't know, whatever they said. And then they say, well, you're dead. You're stained. You are alive. Get out of here. I mean, you know, colloquially.
Yeah.
And the living person goes back to work, and all of a sudden they're back in the room, but the person that died stays. There's over 100 of those.
Oh, my.
It's kind of Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
The last one is where somebody, they frequently meet family members. And I don't think the heavenly cases, they're virtually never evidential. It's a person saying, oh, I saw Jesus and he hugged me and he said, I'll be back here someday, but I'm sorry, there's no data for that.
Right.
But there's one case where sometimes they meet somebody who tells them something that nobody in their family knows, but it solves a very big thing that we worried about ever since this person died. And they tell them, and when they come back, they go, hey, you know the something? It's in the something behind the something. They tell them as soon as they come back, everybody solves this problem and figures this out. So that's Twilight Zone too, because it's a person who's been, in one case, like, for example, the person may have been dead for 10 years. That's still a long time of afterlife, but still not eternal life.
Right.
So all 5 categories.
Yeah. So what do you personally make of these instances? I mean, are you persuaded personally by most of them, all of them?
Okay, when you say most of them, all of them, of the very best evidential cases?
Yes, of the very best ones.
Yes. I think virtually they are irrefutable I think they're very tight evidence. I do think they work together with things like intelligent design and fine tuning. They all form a religious picture that's true of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I were an atheist, I'd be very uncomfortable at the data for an afterlife, because then I have to ask the question, what am I going to do about this?
Right.
You know?
What are some of the atheist responses when you give them these types of evidential scenarios?
They get ticked. It's like everything else.
Yeah.
When you go, I mean the mythers, I mean the radical guys.
Right, the radical ones.
That the Bart Ehrmans would even critique for 20
Yeah.
pages. The real radical guys. And they'll go, I don't like this. Because then I would have something that I have to, I said, well, yeah, I can't help that. If there's something you need to measure up to, that's between you and, the Lord, from my viewpoint. Now, it's a way to witness. But they just get mad. They get mad just like if you started. The response is similar to you going, hey, how about 10 evidences of the resurrection?
Mm.
They respond kind of the same way.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're not happy.
Yeah. Have you ever had, let's put the sort of radical internet atheists to the side, those who get really somewhat rebellious and antagonistic. Yeah. Let's put those aside for the minute. Have you ever had like an atheist, someone whom you encounter, maybe you're a friend with somebody, and you had a positive response?
An atheist had a positive response?
Right, yeah, or unbeliever, someone who's not a Christian even.
Okay, here's the problem. A lot of them say, I was greeted by blank. Now, who's blank? Most of the time they'll say an angel. Sometimes they'll say Jesus. And whoever this person was, they were the lovingest beings I ever knew. I felt close. And they said, you're going to be with you here someday, and you're going to stay, but not now. You're not dead. They send it back. But they were led to believe that they were told they were a believer. Okay, so yeah, there's many of those cases. Here's the problem. None of those are evidential.
Mm.
Because if you go, I saw somebody, who was it? An angel. Okay, great. Who was it? Jesus. I don't know, Moses. I mean, pick anybody you want, but you're the only person. There's no evidence for it. And I can't verify your heavenly experience. And I could argue this way. Well, of course you hope you're going to live forever. So your mind manufactured a positive experience. How do you refute that?
Yeah.
So I don't think the heavenly cases give much by way of evidence.
Yeah. And just in case some of our listeners or viewers haven't totally latched onto this yet, let's sort of summarize. Basically what you're saying is by evidence is you can validate it, such as the instance that you gave with the doctor getting up, on the ladder and checking the 82 quarter and so on and so forth. Because now you have somebody outside of the experience checking, if you will.
I'm pretty sure that's why he wanted the doctor.
Yeah.
Not just apart from him, but a guy with a doctor's degree, a doctor, everybody respects MDs.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
What do you make of the experiences, for example, we hear a lot from missionaries, for example, in the Middle East with Muslims converting to Christ. They have, whether it's a vision or a dream. I've read several that say, I was visited by Jesus and he told me to go visit this guy, and he ended up being a pastor. He's walking down the road, talked with him. The pastor preaches the gospel to him, and the Muslim becomes a Christian. Would that be sort of in the area of evidential, or would that be more like I saw an angel type of situation?
Yeah, I don't think it's as heavy as the 12-digit number on top of the machine.
Sure.
But if a person says, and they wouldn't try it out, I thought you were going to ask was the general Muslim who saw Jesus pictures, and I talked to a specialist 15 years ago of a guy who collects those. He told me 15 years ago we're in our second 100,000.
Oh my!
Of those, and I thought you were going to ask me what I thought. I was just going to say I'm really open. I'm really open to this kind of thing. I think the supernatural is all around us, and we just have to put it in the right file folders. But if somebody says something like that, so in your example, the person becomes a Christian, then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm really open.
Yeah. Would you call that an evidential type? Would you categorize
I
it
don't know how
that way?
evidential it is. I'm happy it's a salvation experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
The way we judge those things. I don't know how evidential it is, but I would say, yeah, it's evidential to this degree. The person you said you met is not the person you would expect if you were a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
It was Isa in your book almost 100 times in the Quran. It was Isa. But I mean, to a certain extent, a Muslim could say they see Isa because I debated a Muslim imam one time, and he said, whenever he said Jesus' name, when he said Isa's name, he said, peace be upon him, the same way he does Muhammad. So what I mean is they could have interpreted that he's the second most important person.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think that that's somewhat evidential, but more importantly, I'm happy for their salvation.
Oh, well, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We talk about, obviously, NDEs being evidence for at least life beyond the grave.
Right.
There's at least an afterlife, and it's a supernatural event.
Yes.
And then at the beginning of our discussion, I was talking about how in my sort of upbringing, at one point in my life anyway, I had sort of that skepticism, even as a Christian believer.
That was me.
Yeah. So my question is, why do you think, I've done a lot of self-reflection on this. I've got my own answers to some of this. But why do you think that some Christian believers, not all obviously, but people like myself and maybe even like you back, years ago, why would we as Christian believers be somewhat skeptical of near-death experiences? I mean, maybe you could ponder that based upon your own experience and your own personal journey. But I find it fascinating that I myself, as I look at myself now, back on my younger age, and I think, I believed in Jesus' resurrection. I believed in the miracles in the Bible that were described. Why is it so hard to accept that some of these things can happen today? I don't know. Maybe it's something you haven't pondered before.
No, I thought about this, and besides, it's close to my experience of the way I had doubts. I'll give you a couple of reasons. I think we're skeptical of them because, number one, theological reason, we suspect. You hear this? I do this a lot with Indies, and I hear this objection a lot. Well, the way I understand it is, if you're a Muslim, you'll see Muhammad. If you're a Buddhist, you'll see Buddha. If you're a Hindu, you'll see Krishna. So really, the reason I'm skeptical is because NDEs are an apologetic for universalism. Okay, but now that's not true. That doesn't follow.
Right.
And another one is, this is a more sobering one in a way, I think we all, in our world, we are all bitten by the bug of naturalism or materialism, and we don't believe that, but we have heard enough of these guys argue, we wonder what if they're right. And so I would like NDEs to be true. Boy, would I like them to be true. But what if I took the atheist position and said, we don't really see that stuff in the world today? So I think there's some skepticism.
Right, yeah. I find it actually something very positive, going in the right direction, that now it seems that the information and the stories of NDEs are becoming more accessible. The information, of course, you've been doing some writing on it now for several decades. And we're also hearing a lot more from missionaries. Perhaps a lot of the information age and that transition there in the 90s into the 21st century has been helpful, because now we get to hear things more that are happening through missionary work, where there's healings and there's other types of things going on, and other near-death experiences and conversion experiences. And I think, at least for me, to sort of bounce off a little bit of what you were talking about, for me, that's sort of what finally pushed me a little bit more into the direction of accepting there's so much of this.
NDEs?
Yeah, NDEs, as well as other type of supernatural events that I once, because of a, I think, distorted theological view, rejected. But now, because there's so much evidence and validated evidence from numerous people, that I couldn't reject it anymore. It's more like I had to tweak my theology now, because my theology, you have to do something, right? Yeah, you have to make room for this. And what's interesting is when you look at Scripture with an honest point of view and in the Christian view, there was already room there. It was my own theology that was distorted. And so now I have to modify the theology so that it can account for these things that are seemingly happening, and beyond reasonable doubt anyway.
I think there's a real easy response to that. Well, I gave the two things that may cause believers to do this. On the thing that we think it's an apologetic for universalism, there's a really easy answer, and I've already given it, but I'll just repeat it. I think the things that evidential cases come from this worldly reports, probably 95% of them, 99% of them come from this worldly. It's the car accident down the street where the police report was after your heart attack, and it got solved before they got you back to state of equilibrium. I'm just making that case up, but it's
Sure.
this worldly stuff. It's the 1982 quarter is this worldly. The 12-digit number is on a real machine in a real room with a woman who's OCD. But that stuff, that's where it's evidential. If you go, well, yeah, but I don't like this looking like universalism, you don't have to worry about it because there's no evidence. I accept Flora 1 and the real world. I'm super, super skeptical of what's in Flora 2 because there's virtually no backup for any of that stuff. So I can listen to you and you go, oh, so you're a Muslim and you say you met Jesus, and well, that's kind of, that sounds like my worldview, but I'm skeptical enough that I can't even say you met Jesus. I'm not sure. You may have.
Yeah.
You may have, and God bless you if you did.
Yeah.
You know, I can't say that's evidence because he already believes in Esau, and he's got 90-some verses on it, so he knows who the person is.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm skeptical enough that I wouldn't say I'm sure he saw Jesus, but he might be sure he saw Jesus.
Right.
But it's not an apologetic for universalism.
Right.
Because they don't have data for that up there.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'll just tell you the shorthand answer. In Muslim and Buddhist NDEs, there's like, in one study, there's like virtually none or no reports of them seeing their own characters. And some of them who are unbelievers report seeing Jesus. So now you're getting, but see, I still don't think that that's proof. I just say that's what I would expect if my worldview is true, but I don't think that's proof of my world. You know what I mean? Because I don't believe that. Not good enough evidence.
Right. As we conclude here, I want our viewers to be able to access some of the materials you've written on this. Can you just describe a few of the books or the articles that you've written that we can direct our viewers to?
Sure. I wrote 3 extended essays on this. One is on evidential NDEs. It was published by Blackwell Press in Oxford, Wiley Blackwell, and they claim to be the #1 scholarly press in the world. I tell people it's kind of odd because they're right down the street from Oxford University. They are in Oxford, England. But it's in a book called The Blackwell Companion for Mind-Body Dualism, I think is the name of it. And I'm debating a guy who says there's no NDEs, and I'm arguing for NDEs. The second one is the discovery, the Christian intelligent design fine-tuning people, and that was also a book on dualism, but they weren't debating. Everybody in there is arguing for dualism. They wanted empirical chapters. That's the one I did that J.P. Moreland said, Get your head on right, do a good job. And so it's already out, and it's called Minding the Brain, MINDING, Minding the Brain, a little play on words, and Discovery publishers did that. The third one is Back to Blackwell again. It's another Blackwell companion, but strangely enough, it's a Blackwell. It's not out yet, but it's a Blackwell companion with a contract for Christian apologetics. It's a Blackwell companion, and I didn't just do an argument. It wasn't just for NDEs. It was 4 arguments for an afterlife, and one of them's a resurrection. One of them's NDEs. And then I give 2 others. But NDEs is very prominent there, too. I give a lot of good cases.
Okay.
So all 3 of those, 2 with Blackwell and 1 with Discovery.
Okay, great. I'm also going to plug for you your massive 3-volume work on the, or is it 4 volumes?
Well, there's 3 out now.
There's 3 out now, but the 4th one's coming on the resurrection of Jesus. Give us just a little bit of description about that because that is just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, 4 volumes of the resurrection. Manuscript pages were in the neighborhood of 6,000 pages. But I think, we don't know yet. Volume 4 is not done. I think it's going to be about 3,700 pages published.
Mm.
So under 4,000. First one is on evidences for Christianity. It's 1,000. It's just short of 1,100 pages. Second one is on refutations against naturalistic theories. Third one just came out in May, and it's on. Now I get away from apologetics here, and it's more like a survey, and it's what thinkers of all across all religious disciplines. You got atheists, agnostics, other religions, Christians, borderline Christians. All they're doing is talking about a bunch of different subjects on the resurrection. And it's all categorized like it's like an encyclopedia of the resurrection with views across the board. That's 3. And 4 is a book that divides the first half of volume 4 is the resurrection of theology. The second half of volume 4 is the resurrection of Christian practice, sort of like pastoral, ministerial ethics, witnessing, death and dying. What do you do when a loved one's suffering? It's applying the resurrection to all those tough questions. That's the second half of volume 4.
That's great. That's great. I'm looking forward to reading those. It may take me a couple of years.
It took me a couple of years to write it.
Yeah, actually, that was going to be my next question. About how many years do you estimate?
Like 13 years. Now, don't forget, I'd already been in them for decades and already had done the research, and it still took me 13 years.
13 years, wow. That's phenomenal. But I think it's going to be one of those works that is going to go down in history as one of the most definitive.
I appreciate you saying that, because, praise the Lord, because right now in my own life, probably my favorite subject right now is, what does apologetics say about ministry? How can apologetics help life? It's a pastoral question.
Absolutely.
How do we help life to change? How do we help people to be better witnesses, to do a better job with suffering? How do you write a sermon at a funeral? What do you say to a suffering person? I really would like this to make life easier, and that's the second half of volume 4. So my hope would be that it touches people's lives and is good for ministry.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it. Well, thank you, Gary. I appreciate it. Let me shake your hand there.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. And hopefully our viewers get a lot of info here and something to glean from. And so, but thank you. And you're still at Liberty University, is that correct?
I still am. I still teach full time. All my courses are PhD courses.
Okay, awesome, great.
So teach some guys that, see, that again is my goal. I want these guys to go out and start teaching. They need that final credential, a PhD credential, then go teach. I'm trying to see ministry multiplied. So it's still that idea. What are you doing with it? What are you doing with this stuff?
That's right. And, that really resonates with me, because that's always something that is always in my view. I don't want to just be all about the mind, but be able to put it into action.
Well, you're there. You taught philosophy, and now you're pastoring. So you're seeing that same, bring it down to this level.
That's right.
And bless people with it. So that's where I am with these books, too.
Well, amen. Thank you so much, Gary.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.